sponsors who support this NPR station.
Support comes from WFAE members and Mazda of South Charlotte, pledging to help end child hunger in the Carolinas through ongoing support of Second Harvest Food Bank of Metrolina. Details about this initiative at mazdaofsouthcharlotte.com.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins on the local news roundup. A three-judge panel rejects the legislature's redraw of congressional maps while accepting the legislative maps. What happens next? The Charlotte-Mecklenburg School Board reaches a unanimous decision to end the mask mandate in schools beginning March 7th. A suspect is ID'd in the shooting death of a CATS bus driver. While that killing has ignited a difficult conversation among transit drivers about safety. Plus, Charlotte City Council okays two controversial rezoning requests and considers a vote to make camping on city property a crime. To take us through those stories and more, WFAE's education reporter Ann Doss Helms is here. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning.
Nick Oxner is WBTV's executive producer for investigations and their chief investigative reporter. He's also the co-author of The Vote Collectors about North Carolina's 9th Congressional District election fraud scandal. And he joins us in a car traveling west.
Good morning.
Good morning, yes. Mary C. Curtis is a columnist for Roll Call and host of their Equal Time podcast. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning. We're a global show.
That's right. And Eric Spanberg is back. He's not global. He's only here in this chair at all time. He's the editor of the Charlotte Business Journal. Welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning.
A three-judge panel passed judgment, as I said a moment ago, on the congressional and legislative district maps that were redrawn by the legislature on order of the North Carolina Supreme Court. It was a split decision at the lower court. The lower court approved the legislative but rejected the congressional maps. Why did they accept one and not the other? Nick.
Well, the congressional maps that they accepted were recommended by the three-judge panel appointed a panel of three former judges to be something called special masters, which are basically advisors to the court, which work to draw specifically an alternate congressional map aimed at what the court wanted to be or would deem to be the most fair, impartial maps, most competitive maps. And so ultimately the ruling of the three-judge panel found that the legislative districts were within the fair boundaries that the Supreme Court set out and competitive boundaries, but that these congressional maps were more fair and more competitive as drawn by this group of special masters.
Catawba College professor Dr. Michael Bitzer explained the process this way.
Well, they used the map that was submitted by the General Assembly. They found some issues, particularly related to some of the statistical analyses that didn't quite fit into what the state Supreme Court had put as parameters.
So these three-judge panel appointed the three special masters who then drew up their own maps and submitted them, and the court approved their maps. How does the congressional map drawn by the special masters differ from the one drawn by the or redrawn by the General Assembly?
Well, one of the things, I think the thing that is most resonant locally is that you split Mecklenburg and you will have two heavily Democratic congressional districts. You'll have the 12th and the new 14th that's been added since we had the census data come in. So now you have an opportunity to have two Democrats coming from Mecklenburg, but, and there's always a but, the judges or the advisors that Nick just mentioned who created this plan for the congressional districts are not likely to be doing that in 2024, meaning that when you are an eager Democrat and you jump into this race and get that 14th district seat, you might not be there very long because that district is not going to look anything like the way it does currently or is going to look in 2024.
That is because this only lasts one election cycle, these maps, right, Mary?
Right.
Yes, and we do the usual musical seats. And of course, there are going to be new maps drawn by the legislature. And if it's Republican leaning, you'll see similar maps to the ones that were challenged, and you'll see even more challenges. Just ask poor Kathy Manning, who was elected as a Democrat from the Greensboro area. And then the original maps obliterated her district. And then the next maps had her in a Republican leaning one, and now it looks like maybe she has a shot because they have consolidated that area a little more. This also has national implications, as we all know, because the Republicans look likely, that's what it looks like, but they really want to take the House of Representatives, and Kevin McCarthy is already salivating over becoming the majority leader. But with this, and with also the fact that Democrats in states like New York and Illinois are also doing their own bit of redistricting, it seems like you can't do it just with redistricting. But this is for this cycle. And it also depends upon a wave election. In wave elections, these lines matter less. So, as usual, North Carolina is in the middle of something that is still not finished. But these candidates still have to file and have filed because they did not put back the primary. And we have, of course, House Speaker Tim Moore saying that the new thing is nothing short of egregious, these new maps, and it's a judicial takeover. So it also means that the elections for judges in the state Supreme Court, they're going to be very much contested because the fact that you had a 4-3 Democratic majority is the reason why these maps were thrown out in the first place.
And just to pick up on that, 2 Democrats on that state Supreme Court are up for those seats are up for election. So you're going to see a ton of money and attention poured into that, because if the Republicans get just one of those, then of course the maps that the Republican-led legislature are much likelier to be accepted. I'm sorry, Nick, I think I interrupted you.
I guess not. I guess you didn't.
They didn't, and they didn't touch the state maps. So,
So let's talk about the fact that this is a one-cycle congressional map, and that this may be a one-time shot, at least in Mecklenburg County, for the second Democrat, because of a Republican-leaning legislature, and they're going to draw these new maps. But what happens with these new legislative maps? Is the Republican majority likely to be as strong as it is today, Nick?
Yeah. Yes, and these maps that were drawn by the legislature in the House, I believe, actually got some bipartisan cooperation support, not so in the state Senate, and they stand. They passed you heard Dr. Mitchell in that cut that we listened to talk about that statistical threshold. They passed that ensures some level of competitiveness across the state, but Republicans will still likely have an advantage under those maps in the state House and the state Senate, which means they'll be the ones drawing the new congressional maps in 2028.
And Roy Cooper has already come out and said that the state Senate maps are not a fair representation. So that's where the fight is as well.
The WFAE asked Dr. Michael Bitzer for his take on what all this will mean for Democrats and Republicans running in North Carolina for Congress.
It looks like right now it could be a potential 7 Republican leaning districts. There could be 6 Democratic districts and 1 potential swing district that looks like it leans slightly to the Republicans. So we could, in a kind of ordinary scenario, potentially see a 7-7 divided congressional delegation coming out of North Carolina.
And when we spoke to Chris Cooper, we didn't speak to him. WSOC TV's Joe Bruno spoke to Chris Cooper, who is Appalachian state political scientist there, summed up our state's experience with redistricting this way.
Chaos, musical chairs, uncertainty, renumbering, moving districts around. This appears to be North Carolina politics in 2022, in 2021, in 2020, and heck, all the way back to the 1990s.
In the legislature's final map, in the final congressional map, they divided Mecklenburg into 2 districts, as we've talked about. The 12th district, which has been Alma Adams district. Before that, it was Mel Watts district, I believe. And the 14th, which is a brand new district. And that district extends from southwest Mecklenburg into the eastern part of Gaston County. Does that make it a purple district, the 14th?
No, because it includes a chunk of predominantly Democrat voters in Mecklenburg County,
West Charlotte,
and goes into Gaston County. So no, it might make it slightly more competitive than it could have been, but no, I would expect the Democrat to be elected from that district.
So North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore, as Mary told us a moment ago, called the court's decision on the congressional map nothing short of egregious. And he continued, quote, the trial court's decision to impose a map drawn by anyone other than the legislature is simply unconstitutional and an affront to every North Carolina voter whose representation would be determined by unelected partisan activists. Let me be clear, he said, this court has effectively taken a hammer to our state constitution and the rule of law, and he immediately promised to file an appeal with the state Supreme Court. Has that happened? And why, if that's happened, are we going on with candidate filing?
It did have, so look, these maps and the decision that was ultimately handed down made everyone angry. Republicans were angry at the congressional maps. Democrats were angry at the legislative maps. Everyone appealed some portion of the ruling to the state Supreme Court. And in lightning speed, the state Supreme Court ruled that they sided with all of the trial court maps. So quashing any appeals, which allowed candidate filing to start yesterday at 8 a.m.
Okay. So
We have one brief moment of certainty. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Prior to the court's decision, there was speculation about whether 11th District Representative Madison Cawthorn would follow through and switch to the 14th District or stay in the 11th District, which is to the west and up in the mountains. And that might make it more favorable for House Speaker Tim Moore to jump into this race, something he was considering and then decided not to when Madison Cawthorn said he might go into the 14th. What have we heard about those shifts?
Cawthorn is now going to run for the district that he's in.
Aha.
So, well, I mean, that's
So
today's Friday. It's 9:20, so at least
Yeah.
for the moment. If you're listening to a replay, you might want to check your phone. So yeah, that was one of the big swings when I was talking about the Mecklenburg district earlier. So for the moment, he's back at home.
And you also had
Interesting.
Congressman Dan Bishop flirting with running to be a judge so he could stop the judicial activism. But I think he's going to run in his congressional district.
The Washington Post magazine published an article recently about Madison Cawthorn and his possible decision to run in the 14th district, which they characterized as being more conservative than the district he's in, and added that it includes the higher profile Charlotte media market. That's not true. It's not more conservative than Western North Carolina, is it?
The district that he wanted, the 14th that he was going to run for was, but even when he made that move, it was speculated that if that map got thrown out, the 14th was not going to look like it did that he announced for. So everyone saw this peril coming, and so it's somewhat predictable in a way.
So the triply redrawn 14th is not the district he was thinking about running in. The article also alleges that his contemplation of switching districts has turned off some voters in his 11th district and some former supporters who are now saying he cares more about himself than his constituents. And former Henderson County Sheriff George Irwin is quoted in the article as saying, quote, I can't think of one thing that he's done for our district. And some in what is described as a law and order conservative area of North Carolina are a little upset with his activities or alleged activities surrounding the January 6th insurrection. Could all this rumbling undercurrent be why he was considering a switch in the first place?
It could be, yes.
But he's
Okay.
been very clear that he's not interested in legislating. So, I mean, the fact that they are saying this now is like Kel Surprise, right?
And we have a bilingual Charlotte Talks now.
That's right. Well, we are talking about Henderson County. So,
You said that,
map-
Mike, I didn't.
Asheville's a rich area. There are a lot of people who come there for all over the place to vacation. We have to
Yes,
take a
yes.
break. We'll come back and talk about more of the ramifications of these map redraws in just a moment. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Southminster, introducing Embrace Health at Southminster, a small house model that reinvents life as one ages with a person-centered approach to care. More at southminster.org. Coming up Monday on this program, if you recall, at the dawn of the internet, some believed it would make true democracy finally possible. It would be a great equalizer. It would offer everyone equal access to information and commerce, among other things. In short, the internet would serve humanity. Well, that is not exactly what happened. In fact, unequal access to the internet has resulted in unequal access to wealth, among other things. But California Congressman Ro Khanna believes that can change, and he will join us to talk about his prescription for fixing what's wrong with the internet Monday on this program at 9.
Hi, I'm Joni Deutsch, and on the latest episode of the Amplifier podcast, we sit down with Reese Raps, who's been recognized as one of the best emerging rappers in the city of Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm with frustration, meets creation. My dreams linger in my mind, they tailgating. It is no mistaking, I'm where I'm meant to be. My mind.
Listen to the Amplifier podcast on Spotify, NPR One, and WFAE.org/amplifier. Amplifier is powered by Ortho Carolina.
It's the local news roundup on Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. Ann Doss Helms is here. We'll be hearing a lot from her in a moment when we talk about masking in schools. She's our education reporter at WFAE. Mary C. Curtis, columnist at Roll Call, host of their Equal Time podcast. Eric Spanberg, managing editor of the Charlotte Business Journal. And Nick Oxner, chief investigative reporter for WBTV, all with us today. One of the changes that these new maps may bring about is that yesterday, State Senator Jeff Jackson, who decided to drop his bid to run for United States Senate, says he may consider running for Congress now in the 14th congressional district. What was it about these new maps that have him changing his mind, Nick?
Like he could win them. I mean, it really comes down to whether they were viable. The old map, he was, I believe, in the 12th district, although generally speaking, would put him in the 12th district where there was a Democrat incumbent. The 14th district, which could have been a viable alternative, was not really winnable for a Democrat, but the new 14th district is very winnable for a Democrat.
And Republican, as you said, Mary, Republican Dan Bishop may not, he says, run for re-election in the 9th because he says activist judges have subverted our Constitution. And he's now considering a run for a statewide judicial office. He wants to be a judge because he says in 2022, we will restore constitutional government in North Carolina. I didn't know we lost it yet. Mary, given the Republican Party's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, making voting more difficult, putting forth candidates for secretaries of states in areas around the country who have said, had they been in power in 2020, they would have overturned the election. Isn't this rather like the pot calling the kettle black?
You could say that, yes, and you do see this. That's where there's a worry around the country that all of these other races for attorneys general, secretaries of state, they are putting folks in. And there's a concern that people think that January 6th was an insurrection, a coup attempt, and it was over. But so many people think it's ongoing. And so these next races will be very important, and who will control the House is really top of mind. And North Carolina, because of what's going on here, we're in the headlines. And Republicans have already said, if they do take over, you're going to see a lot of hearings about impeachment of Biden and Harris and so much else. So there is a lot at stake.
Eric.
I just one quick note. So with Congressman Bishop, he did make those statements and he did flirt with the idea of not running for Congress again, but then he quickly pivoted off of that and said he will run in the 8th district. He's in the 9th right now. He's going to run in the 8th district. So he will be making another bid for Congress.
And finally,
he only made that announcement after the congressman who's currently in the 8th is moving to the 9th.
Yes.
Thus the musical chairs.
Yes. Congressman Hudson. Yes, you're correct. Yep.
So finally on this topic, yesterday, Governor Cooper was in Charlotte for an event that we'll talk about perhaps later on. It was kind of but while he was here, he did speak about the need to fix our map drawing process with a redistricting commission. He said improvements were made with the court challenge, but the districts still aren't fair. And it speaks to the need in this state for an independent redistricting commission. What are the chances of that coming to pass?
Not very good.
Okay.
And also we've seen in states that have the independent redistricting commissions, there's often pushback to those as well. So that is, not a an incredible solution that is going to work every time. And in the partisan politics that we have right now, good luck with that.
So with the end of the month, we can all go out to our cars and clean out our center consoles of all the used masks that are sitting in them, because mask mandates are falling in Mecklenburg County tomorrow. And as a result of a unanimous vote by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School Board, and the mask mandates in the schools will end on March the 7th. That's the Monday after next. Why wait?
Well, that was really the point of debate that we heard at the Tuesday school board meeting. There, as we talked about, there have been all the state officials have said it's time to make it optional. So many districts had switched that honestly, I thought it was just a matter of who has the last school board meeting to be who has the last mandate. As best I can tell, as of this morning, 19 school districts still have not voted to end their mandate. And apparently Durham last night voted unanimously to keep their mandate longer. So apparently it's not quite as obvious as I thought it would be. But going into Tuesday's meeting, the only debate was what the date would be. And
well, the reason I asked why wait is because Mecklenburg County drops its mandate tomorrow, Saturday. School board member Rhonda Cheek wanted the schools to do the same thing. She asked the county's new health director, Dr. Raynard Washington, whether there would be a public health impact to moving the date up, and he did not have a definite yes or no answer, but he thought it would be wise for schools to have everything in place before the mask mandate goes away. What does that mean? What do you have to have in place to say, don't wear your mask anymore? You don't have to.
And that was kind of the debate of the evening. Rhonda and at least two other board members, there was first a vote to make the cutoff be the 26th, and 3 people voted for that and 6 voted against it. And they were all saying, look, like you said, everybody's thinking this weekend, you clear out your masks, we're done with this. And then you go to school and say, here, you have to put on your mask here. They said that's actually going to create more strain for families and for teachers who have to enforce it. But the majority, the buzzword of the meeting was runway. We need a runway to prepare for this. And they talked about the fact that there also, there are new rules on quarantine tracing. There are potentially kids who have just gotten COVID-19 and they need to figure out how to make sure they're not spreading it. The numbers will go down a little more. A lot of talk about a communication effort. Bottom line was they went with March 7th. And that was the date that the governor had cited. But as Sean Strain pointed out, he didn't say, don't do this until March 7th. He said, you need to have this done by March 7th.
And then you have this interesting exchange between school board member Carol Sawyer and health director Dr. Raynard Washington.
If you were to spend a day in our schools, would you wear a mask?
Absolutely. So I would love to spend a day in the schools and I would wear a mask. I will continue to wear one to work as well.
If you have the health director for Mecklenburg County coming down on the side of caution, saying he will continue to wear a mask to work and would also wear one if he went into a school, why are we dropping the mask requirements?
Well, this is just at the point where they're saying there's room for error now, and there's that allowing families, parents, adult employees to make their own decision based on their risk factors is acceptable. But it is also, and that was one of the things that they really talked about, and that's part of that runway, I guess, is making sure that everybody understands that just because the mask mandate ends on March 7th does not mean everybody goes out and burns their masks. It is still going to be a reasonable decision for a lot of people based on their calculation of their risk, based on potentially family members that might be exposed to whatever they bring back, to say, I'm going to keep the mask on. And they asked about, the idea is if you're just wearing the mask and the other guy who might have COVID is not wearing one, is there any additional protection? And Dr. Washington basically said, there's some. It's, it's a layered thing again. The vaccines are the biggest thing. We really want you to go out and get your vaccines. If you want to wear a mask, it's going to help you a little bit. It's not going to be the end of the world if some other people are not.
And here's another puzzlement. Last week, the General Assembly passed a bill that would make all of this moot. It was the same week, in fact, the same day, that the governor encouraged schools to lift their mask mandates. But yesterday, the governor chose to veto this Free the Smile bill that would have allowed parents to send their children to school unmasked in all public schools. If he said get rid of the masks, Why did he veto the bill?
Well, he said it should be local choice, which so then you've got a district like Durham that said, we're not ready to do this yet. And he's saying they should have a right to make that decision. There's also the fact that as much as we all hope this is the final decline of the COVID numbers and we say goodbye to the crisis, this virus has shown us that it can bounce back in different forms. And he's saying it could actually be dangerous to tie the hands of public health response if we find ourselves dealing with yet another variant of COVID.
Is the legislature likely to override the veto? Eric.
I don't think they have the votes to override the veto.
They don't, although it was notable that there were some Democrats that did vote with Republicans in the House in favor of this bill.
Okay. I think that the larger point that you're clearly getting at, Mike, is that so much of this, maybe not the veto, but so much of this policy seems to just be driven by the fact that people are tired of wearing masks and they're just kind of en masse saying, you know what, I don't want to fool with it anymore.
Much of the same thing happened in the influenza panic in the early 20th century here and around the country, and it came back. The bug came back. Okay, on February the 11th, a bus driver was murdered while driving his bus near Trade and Graham Street downtown in what was described at the time as a road rage incident. 10 days later, police issued an arrest warrant for Darian Drew Tavachit, if that's how you say his name, of Charlotte. That was on February the 18th. This morning is February the 25th. Have they arrested him yet, Nick?
They have not arrested him yet. He remains at large. And while he remains at large, and I think we're going to talk about this in a second, bus drivers continue to remain for their safety for a number of reasons, continue to express those concerns.
Yeah, in the aftermath of that incident, the CEO of CATS said publicly that increasingly transit workers, and I'm paraphrasing here, are finding themselves in danger, not only here, but around the country. And over the past 5 years here in Charlotte, there have been 57 operator assaults, 2 operator shootings, including the one that took the life of Ethan Rivera. Some operators say they feel like they are a sitting target. And WFAE's Sarah D'Elia spoke with one of CAT's drivers about what the job is like.
What have you experienced as a driver?
Cursed out a lot, called all types of things and what they'll do to me, and I immediately call back. Sometimes they'll send someone, sometimes they don't. So that's scary as well. When you don't get the protection, it's scary.
So it doesn't sound like you feel safe doing your job right now.
Right now, no, not at all. Because Monday, after his death, a driver got spit on. That's not safe. So no, a lot of us don't feel safe. Because a lot of drivers haven't been coming to work just because they don't feel safe.
So at noon last Friday, CATS performed a moment of silence for Ethan Rivera, the driver who was shot in that road rage incident. Prior to that, CATS drivers had made some demands so they could feel safer on the job. And a group of drivers will be coming to Monday's city council meeting to voice their concerns about operator safety. What have they asked for, and what are we likely to hear on Monday night? Nick, any idea?
Yeah, I think what we're likely to, sorry, I was hitting the unmute button and could not get to it fast enough. Only been doing Zoom for 2 years. I think what we're likely to hear is continued pleas from these drivers for additional safety, for additional security on buses, for additional protections for drivers.
But what would that be? Nick, what would that be? You have a driver sitting at the front door in a seat, fully exposed, except for maybe a plexiglass shield. What could you do to protect that person?
Well, I guess if I were a driver, what I would ask for is to start an increase in security, or, we have transit police that are hired company police in Charlotte that CATS hires, an increase in those officers and patrolling specifically buses versus light rail fare enforcement, which is primarily what they focus on right now. But I think it's important to hone in on a portion of that interview that we just heard that you played, where the bus driver that you talked to said, a lot of drivers aren't coming to work because they fear for their safety. And we know that they've had a personnel issue as well. And those drivers not coming to work because they have legitimate concerns for their safety is also impacting performance and people's ability to get around town and to access the transit system. And so we're seeing ripple effects from these concerns.
And we had the streetcar. It has been plagued by delays. They said they were having staffing issues. One thing, as Nick was talking, that I wondered about, and I don't have an answer to this, but CATS has a fair amount of COVID recovery grant money still left to spend. I don't know if some of that could be employed in some way to help with some of those things. There are restrictions, but maybe that's one area that they look at to try and enhance some of the driver safety.
I think also we've seen just so many post-COVID people getting back on the roads, road rage incidents. And we have to remember so many Americans now are armed. And so people are acting impulsively and they have guns, and it's, a problem.
Meanwhile, CMPD reports that while overall violent crime is down 5% from this time last year, crimes involving guns are up. Assaults with a deadly weapon are up 6%. Shooting into occupied property is up 2%. And CMPD Lieutenant Stephen Fischbach says that is not their only concern.
More troubling, we're talking about some of our young citizens lost, teenagers. Most recently, we had to talk about one of our public servants that we lost. The CMPD is doing what we can to prevent and address violent crime.
They believe that one solution might be their crime suppression team. What do we know about that? What is that?
Wasn't that the group that I think was formed to try and seize weapons, get more guns off the street? And they have talked about this big picture for at least the last year or so, trying to figure out how to get all of the guns off the street. I mean, it is a constant topic. I think every time we have a significant public safety issue, that is one of the things that is brought up. How do you get these guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them?
And we've seen these crime suppression units in other places, notably Durham had one or has one that is a success story. We know that this was something like this effort has been formed by CMPD here in Charlotte, but I don't think that we've yet to see any measurable results, obviously, as we continue to see an increase in this kind of crime.
We all know, and we've talked about this 1,000 times, that Charlotte has a homeless person problem, and not just because of the lack of affordable housing, but that's a big part of it. And of course, last summer, we spent a lot of time talking about the tent city that sprang up on the outskirts of uptown, which was later closed by the county for health concerns. But the homeless have been known to use park benches and city benches and various parts of the landscape to camp out on now for years. And next week, Charlotte City Council is expected to vote on whether the city should restore potential criminal penalties for camping on city property. That may come as a surprise to some folks. We only have 30 seconds, but has the problem gotten that bad that it needs to be criminalized again? Nick?
Bryan, unmute again. Sorry. I think this is. I don't think so. We haven't heard this. It seems to come a little bit out of the blue. So I actually personally curious what has prompted this. After the tent city was shut down, we saw that they did great steps to rehouse people. So I'm curious what prompted this.
Well, this was recently decriminalized, and we'll talk about at the state level. So we'll talk about that when we come back at Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Carolina Asthma and Allergy Center, committed to educating both the patient and the caregiver with the goal to improve one's quality of life. Breathe, live, thrive. CarolinaAsthma.com. Coming up in 20 minutes, the Roundup continues with the national news look. World leaders have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is there now enough political will to convince President Putin to pull his troops back? Back home, the National Guard is put on standby ahead of planned trucker protests in Washington, D.C. Those are just a few of the stories they'll be talking about in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock on 1A, and we will continue our look at the week's local news when we come back in just seconds. Stay with us.
President Joe Biden will deliver his first State of the Union address on March 1st. The speech to Congress comes as the White House works to battle soaring inflation, curb COVID-19 infections, and nominate a new Supreme Court justice. Join us Tuesday for live coverage of the 2022 State of the Union and expert analysis from NPR News.
That's Tuesday night starting at 9 o'clock at 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
It's Charlotte Talks on the local news roundup on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. Nick Oxner's in a car somewhere heading west for WBTV News. Eric Spanberg is comfortably ensconced and permanently attached to his chair. He is the Charlotte Business Journal's managing editor, and Doss Helms is here for WFAE News. Our education reporter, Mary C. Curtis, who has stopped her roving around at least for the hour that we're on the air. She's a columnist for Roll Call and host of the Equal Time podcast there. The fact that they will be considering at City Council the criminalization of homeless people camping out. This is something that was decriminalized as part of a sweeping state criminal justice reform law. Would such an ordinance at the city level be in conflict with that?
No, and I'm going to defer to Nick in a minute when he has his microphone ready. But essentially, what happened was when the legislature took this step, there were concerns about local municipalities unfairly applying criminal charges in essence. And so now the way that this works is, according to the city attorney, that Charlotte and other cities have to go back and do these things one by one and figure out what the penalties will be. And the idea is so that hopefully it is treated in a fairer manner. Now, there are concerns, I'm sure we're going to get into them, about whether homeless people are going to be charged criminally or civilly, but that is how we got to the point that we are now.
Because Mike, as you mentioned in your intro to this, until they really get at solving the problem of affordable housing in Charlotte, this is not going to go away.
And this applies not just to people who set up tents on vacant land, some of which might be owned by the city or the county. This is about homeless people sleeping on benches downtown, which they've done now for as long as I can remember. The council members Renee Johnson and Braxton Winston have raised some concerns about reviving criminal penalties for that. Is this likely to pass on Monday night, or is this just up for a considerable discussion?
Let's go back just half a second. Eric touched on something I was going to mention, is that the whole reason we're doing this is because the city realized almost after it was too late that it had a bunch of ordinances that were unenforceable now, and they had missed this step to go back and reconsider them. But again, I'm surprised that they're going back to reconsider this one. They don't have to, just because it got nullified. And to your immediate question, Mike, I don't know that this will pass. And if it does, it'll be interesting to see the dynamics between the members of the council who proclaim to be progressive and how, if they support and vote for an ordinance that basically penalizes homelessness.
And this week, City Council signed off on a pair of controversial rezoning proposals in the Ballantyne area that will allow for the development of 2 schools and hundreds of multifamily housing units. Remind us, why was there opposition to this in the first place? And there was opposition.
Well, yeah, the main opposition was to the one that is on Ardrey Kell Road, and it was because of traffic concerns. It's the usual, sticking point when it comes to expansion, particularly in that part of town. Traffic is always a concern. And so what the school board had done, or what the school system had done, is in part to help get these schools built. They paired them, packaged them with private development of apartments and townhomes. And part of the carrot here was that 15%, I think, of one of the apartment complexes is going to be below market rate. And the idea that they're pitching is that teachers and others could live in those apartments.
So is that why this passed, or did this pass because rezoning for development always passes?
Well, didn't Councilman Ed Driggs actually kind of negotiate to try to at least have fewer units in the apartment building, and
He did,
that's
and
why
that-
he was compared to James Brown. He was the
Yes.
hardest working man on the city council, but
That's the most important part, Mary, is that he was compared to James Brown. And then secondly, that he negotiated all of these changes and then still voted against it. So it was yet another interesting wheel of fortune over at the government center.
Okay, well, back to the schools we go. CMS Superintendent Earnest Winston told the school board on Tuesday that the system will start watching earlier for warning signs that high school students won't graduate in 4 years.
The challenges begin way before students get to 12th grade. And so more monitoring at the earlier grade levels, and then responding with real-time interventions to help address those challenges that students may be facing.
And why this decision now, and how does it change the process they were using?
Well, the first part is easy to answer. This is a series of reports that they are doing to monitor their academic goals. And if it seems like every month you're hearing about a new shortcoming in CMS, that's true, because one of these is coming up and a lot of they're not reaching their goals. Pandemic didn't help. The racial gaps are there. So that's why they're talking about this now. But the question of whether they really have a new and effective strategy was one that was batted around a little bit. And all of these, of course, they know that these problems start early. And chronic absenteeism, which is one of the things they focused on, they've been talking about that for years. Disengagement, I thought the most stunning thing in there was that they did a survey that found that only about 25% of high school students described themselves as being engaged in school. Now, this was fall of 2021, so how much were we seeing a remote learning effect? I don't know. But so none of these strategies seemed particularly different, and Earnest Winston acknowledged that. He said, we're really talking about going deeper on what we're already doing. We're talking, and this is kind of his answer to everything, is we're going to do it better and we're going to do it more consistently.
And you said in your story on WFAE, and that CMS graduation rates have been inching down over the past 4 years. The system has set a goal of having 95% of students earning a diploma within 4 years of high school by 2024. 91% should get their diploma by 2022. That's this year, but the projections are more like 83% at the moment. How do they plan to achieve this?
Well, I don't think anybody thinks they're going to meet this year's goal. There's only so much you can do to take those 12th graders who are maybe not on track, but maybe they're on the bubble, and you can get them a couple of credit recovery classes and you can get them across the finish line. So I guess the cynical view of this is it's kicking the can down the road. It's saying, well, maybe in 2 or 3 years we'll be closer. But like so many things, these numbers are much worse when you break them down by race. 92% of white and Asian students in CMS are expected to graduate on time this year. 80% of Black students, 74% of Hispanic students, and 65% of English learners. Now, again, especially the English learners, but anybody that came into the pandemic with disadvantages probably got set back even more during this disruption. So maybe the end of the pandemic, knock on wood if we're there, will help get them a little closer to their goals.
Also, the General Assembly ordered the Department of Public Instruction to commission a study of how much ground students lost during the pandemic. I thought we all knew that from the test scores that came out earlier this fall or last fall.
This is going to be a much more sophisticated analysis than what people like Steve Harrison and I have done. Many journalists, many others have looked at the test scores, 2019 versus 2021. This is the organization that does the value added ratings for teachers, that does the school growth measures. They've got a new formula that they're going to plug in and say, we can look at each student and say, based on, and they're actually using 2018 as their base year, based on all of the testing data we have for them up to that point, here's where they should have been in 2021 if nothing changed. Here's where they actually are. So they say they're going to translate that to months of learning. It's going to be broken down by race, by all sorts of demographic factors. Eventually, it's going to be broken out by district and by school. And we're going to be able to say that, for instance, CMS students lost X number of months of learning. Union County students lost Y number of months. This is going to play out over a very long period of time, but we're going to get our first big look at that at Wednesday's State Board of Education meeting.
And finally, for the second time this month, the North Carolina House panel on the future of public education postponed discussions on teacher pay and benefits. The House Select Committee on an Education System for North Carolina's Future is the name of that committee. And it says that teacher salary scale starts lower than that of other state employees, and it takes longer for teachers to reach the top of that scale, 25 years in most cases. Were it not for the mass exodus of teachers from the profession and the classroom, and the teacher shortages that result from that, and the fact that younger people are not going into the teaching profession, would this even be a topic of conversation?
Well, it's always a topic of conversation. And, you know, certainly as you talk about the future of education, you got to talk about the future of teachers. And people will say, certainly correctly, that compensation is not the only factor in creating a better base of teachers, a stronger base, fewer vacancies out there. But you got to look at compensation. And so what they've had is these charts prepared by their staff, and they haven't gotten around to reviewing them or talking about them.
Yesterday, Governor Cooper was in town and appearing with Mayor Lyles on the west side because they were at the unveiling of Pole Vault. It's an electric car charging a piece of equipment that's attached to a utility pole at the Ritz in Washington Heights, which is a new city park in that historically African-American neighborhood. And the governor says this is part of his, will help him reach his goal of increasing electric vehicles because they need places to charge, particularly if you don't have a house and where you can put a charger. Why is this? Why? This is a public-private partnership. It's evidently taking electricity from the light pole system in the city. So the city is kind of supplying the power. What's different about this? Why is this a big deal?
Well, those are two different questions, Mike. But I think that you partially answered this. As you know, this was a photo op. This was a political opportunity to promote this particular program, and that you would have a place to charge if you didn't have one at home. I didn't cover this, but I noticed that on social media, everyone who was covering it, or a lot of people who were covering it, were instantly posing the question of why did they select this particular area, because it doesn't, a lot of people don't think there's a lot of electric vehicle traffic. So there were already questions before the thing even started. So that's what
it's also not in a parking lot. And as our friend Joe Bruno pointed out, the governor and the mayor drove up in an EV together, but they got in that EV in the parking lot across from where this charger is. Roy Cooper drove his gas-powered motorcade to get in the EV to drive it across the street.
Oh, gosh. Okay. After already being found guilty of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia and sentenced to life sentences at the state level, a jury this week found Travis McMichael, his father Greg McMichael, and their neighbor William Bryan guilty on all counts in a federal hate crimes trial. Mary, what does that mean for these men?
Well, it means, they were already guilty in state court, but these are hate crime charges in federal cases. And it's thought to be very significant because the Department of Justice seldom brings these because they're hard to prove, because you have to prove motive, that racism motivated these folks. Unfortunately, there was plenty of evidence that it was there. Now, it's a hope because the Biden administration had said they were going to prosecute more of these. And so there's hope for that. So you say it's a victory. But when you think of the fact that nobody would have been charged with anything had it not been for a video and activism on the part of his mother in particular, Wanda Cooper Jones. And North Carolina has a very vague and 2-sentence long hate crime and hate crime enhancement, and South Carolina doesn't have one of 2 states. So a victory, but a lot to do moving forward.
And moving on to our final category today, sports. Major League Soccer makes its debut in Charlotte tomorrow, Saturday, the 26th, and MLS Commissioner Don Garber predicted big things ahead for the team. He also touted all the great new stadiums being built around the country for soccer, ours not being one of them. Is that right, Eric?
You are correct, Mike. So tomorrow is the first match. They're in D.C. Then the following Saturday, they're expecting 74,000 people at Bank of America Stadium for the first home match, which would set a single match record for MLS. We'll see what happens after that.
And it was a big week for Charlotte sports figures. We had LaMelo Ball joining Davidson alum Steph Curry in the NBA All-Star game. They both excelled. Let's go to the videotape and this play-by-play from Eric.
So LaMelo Ball,
20 seconds.
18 points, but not a triple-double, Mike. I know that disturbs you. Steph Curry, a record 16 3-pointers and 50 points in the game's MVP. And now back to you, sir.
Thank you. Can we claim him still, Steph Curry? Can we still claim
Absolutely.
him?
When he's the All-Star
Always.
Game MVP, yes.
Always.
Okay. And in a completely different sport, Charlotte's Austin Cindric became the second youngest person ever to win the Daytona 500. He's 23 years old, just days away from getting his learner's permit. And he spoke with our Marshall Terry about graduating from Cannon School in Concord, just as he was a standout at the Daytona 500 and NASCAR. He was a standout at his high school graduation, but not for reasons you may think.
Yeah, I walked off the stage, got my diploma, and went to Charlotte Motor Speedway 10 minutes down the road to qualify for the truck race, and then race that night. So it's kind of what my life's always been about. You know, Cannon School, they do a lot for college prep, and it was kind of weird being really the only student in my class that didn't have any plans on going to college. Even when we did like the, college day in senior year, everybody wears their, the college that they've committed to, or, something along those lines. During the day, you wear a t-shirt, a hoodie or whatever. And I showed up with a cutoff Tony Stewart t-shirt on because I knew I was going NASCAR racing. So just another way of having fun, I guess.
So there's the college track in high school, and then there's the NASCAR track. That's the moral of that story. And Austin told Marshall Terry that this win puts him in the NASCAR All-Star race and in the race to the NASCAR playoffs. He says it changes the mentality of how aggressive he can be or how patient he can be in a given scenario as the season progresses. So that is math. So he did okay in math. All right. That's all the time we have. Eric Spanberg joined us today from the Charlotte Business Journal. We thank him for his play-by-play coverage of the NBA All-Star Game, and Doss Helms from WFAE News, our education reporter, Nick Oxner on the road to somewhere from WBTV News, and Mary C. Curtis from Roll Call. Thank you all for the hour.
Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte. Our executive producer is Wendy Herkey. The senior producer is Aaron Keever.